Over in the pages of Marvel Comics' current X-Men titles, the mutants are preparing for a massive battle between the X-Men and the anti-mutant group known as Orchis. The confrontation between these two factions has been building across so many books and is set to close in over at the X-Men's upcoming Hellfire Gala. But just in advance of that storyline, the mercenary known as POGG UR-POGG is returning from the pages of Ten of Swords over in the Marvel Universe. Will the X-Men be able to dispatch their foe before the upcoming Hellfire Gala? My name is Arako Braddock, and today let's go ahead and dive into the pages of X-Men issue 24 to see how the X-Men are about to close in on the FallofX storyline. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. And without further ado here, I want to introduce some context behind X-Men 24 with Marvel Comics solicitation text for the issue. POGG UR-POGG for hire. Hired for the dirtiest of jobs, a deadly mercenary comes crashing into the X-Men at their most vulnerable moments. But not just any mercenary. Finally, the breakout fan favorite from Ten of Swords, POGG UR-POGG, returns. Want to introduce our creative team on X-Men 24. This issue is written by Gerry Duggan, featuring art from Joshua Cassara, colors from Frank Martin, and letters from VC's Clayton Cowles. The issue is designed by Tom Muller and Jay Bowen, and the cover for the issue is illustrated from Joshua Cassara as well as Marte Gracia. Here's a look at POGG UR-POGG endangering the Marvel Universe's X-Men. Want to extend a big thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview of the issue so incredibly fast. And of course, I want to start by talking a little bit about what Joshua Cassara lends to X-Men 24. So I really appreciate the curved line that Cassara uses to establish the characterization of heroes like Cable over in the story. This opening sequence was full of so much intrigue, but I think the loose line that Cassara brought over to the kind of nature of this sequence really helped establish the kind of underlying nature of the story. Also, in this next sequence with Destiny and Rogue, I love the facial expressions that Cassara was able to lend over to Rogue specifically, who is kind of pushing back against Destiny over in this scene. Shockingly enough, even though Destiny wears a mask in this sequence, I feel like she's still able to emote through some of her eyes and the reflection in the expression as well. So have to lend it to Cassara for finding some kind of bold and innovative ways to show expressions for characters who are trying to hide their emotions from others in the issue. And I want to go ahead and also hone in on this excellent use of negative space from both Cassara and colorist in the issue, Frank Martin, as well. Let's take a look at this next page with POGG UR-POGG over on Game World in the issue. I think the way that POGG UR-POGG is just so large in the context of the rest of the page definitely lends something intriguing to the story and introduces the massive sense of scale that POGG brings to the issue as a whole. So even though I think this is more of a kind of like stopgap villain for the X-Men, I think they definitely have a great sequence, and Joshua Cassara just does a great job lending wonderful and bold artwork over to the sequence. I want to focus in on Gerry Duggan's script over on X-Men issue 24. This first sequence that we're looking at was a really fantastic moment. I think we've seen this in events a couple times where characters kind of realize that a big storyline is coming and then they go off on their own to kind of stop the story before it even takes place here. So love the fact that Cable is trying to prevent the fall of X before it even happens. And I think the way that this issue kind of introduces, or this sequence rather, brings in some of the rest of the X-Men villains does a great job showing readers how well I think all these X-Men books have done in establishing the villains behind Orchis, whether they be characters like Dr. Stasis or Moira in the Marvel Universe. I think the X-Men now have a really solid team of villains that several creators have been building up over the past couple months. Also, in this issue, we get this really foreboding scene with Rogue and Destiny that we mentioned earlier, kind of previewing what's upcoming over in FallofX. I love the fact that over on this speech balloon that we're looking at, it looks like Destiny actually gives some sequences or maybe some spoilers and a bit of a cryptic message that readers are meant to uncover. I'm definitely going to have a fun time going back and trying to make heads or tails out of some of Destiny's predictions over in this issue as well. Elsewhere, we already took a bit of a preview between the X-Men's battle with POGG or POGG over on Game World. I thought this was a fun confrontation between the X-Men and one of their kind of off the beaten path villains to establish the kind of fun and irreverent nature of the issue. Also, this sequence was Gerry Duggan's excuse to kind of shoehorn some of his favorite characters in the X-Men universe over to this issue. I'm talking about characters like Synch and Talon, as well as Forge, who Duggan has really explored with in the past couple issues of X-Men as well. Really great to see all these characters still in play over in this current X-Men comic book from Marvel. Also, Game World was used very early on in this X-Men run, so really appreciate the fact that it's referenced here over in this issue as well. Elsewhere in the story, we also deal directly with some of the relationship fallout between Scott and Jean. I thought Gerry Duggan had some very interesting commentary, especially from Jean's side of the table, as Jean is really having seemingly a tough time adapting to the current nature of the X-Men and appears to be trying to kind of bring Scott away from some of his duties and maybe just pursue a relationship with Jean outside of some of the context of X-Men or Krakoa, which will be really interesting to see develop in future issues that have really tried to establish the fact that there's some relationship drama between Scott and Jean. I'd be curious to see if this is the end of it or if there is still more to come with this duo. Also, I think the way that this storyline kind of took a bit of a right turn with Sunfire and Magic a little bit later in the issue definitely kept my interest in the storyline. I feel like there's a lot of characters in this sequence, but a lot of them are written really, really well in the story. And I think this final sequence with Sunfire really teases a fascinating element of X-Men that I never would have anticipated, that took me totally out of left field. I think there's been so many fantastic cliffhangers on this run of X-Men, and even though this one is outside of the context of kind of humor that Gerry Duggan likes to utilize in some of these cliffhangers, it adds a plot beat to the X-Men that I never expected to unfold in this way. And as one kind of final aside here, I think the way that Duggan wrote that really tense moment over between Polaris and Jean Grey also carried a really kind of thin line of characterization that really helped establish the relationship between these two characters. So really appreciate the attention to detail that Duggan lent to these two characters in the issue here. So overall, at the end of the day, I think X-Men 24 was a great issue, really establishing the board for Fall of X and kind of inching all of these individual X-Men forward towards a new status quo. This series has done a great job juggling a really, really big cast. And I think a lot of these X-Men characters are captured with lots of intrigue. What are some of your thoughts over on Cable trying to stop the Fall of X before it happened over in the opening sequence? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming to check out our review for X-Men 24, and we'll be back to cover Fall of X and everything X-Men related in the near future. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.